I'm Guy and I help farmers get planning permission on their farms. Welcome back to the Farmers Planning Podcast, and we've got a new episode for you. Today, I have the lovely guest of my wife, Emily. And actually having my wife on the podcast is definitely going to test something, whether it's our marriage or our working relationship. Let's see how it goes. Emily, welcome to the podcast, the Farmers Planning Podcast.
Thanks very much.
So you're one of the founders and the directors at Foxes Rural. And it's really awkward having you sat next to me talking about something quite professional like this. So on the way in, we were actually talking about the Newlyweds podcast. And I was told that Jamie Lang and Sophie are no longer on that. And
Yeah, because they're married already.
Oh, right. And we were trying to think of podcast formats. So, yeah, we're just talking about that. And what do you think? So you run your own farm business. At the moment, we run it together and we have done for, over 15 years. What's it like working with me as your husband?
I think it definitely has pros and cons. One thing is that we never have to come in at the end of the day and say, how's your day been? Because we've shared the day together. So we know exactly how it's been in terms of what's gone on, if anything's dramatic's happened, etc. I would say we are very different people, personality-wise. So that again has its pros and cons in that we take the responsibilities and roles differently that suit our personalities more. I'm much happier on the phone doing sales. That's kind of where my strengths lay, whereas you're much more on the policy, the procedures, and doing the strategy and doing things right.
Yeah, so it makes a good team like that, but because we've got opposite strengths, and I think a lot of farmers will be family businesses. So, working with husband and wives, it becomes quite common in the farming industry. We're finding that, when we're doing a lot of planning on farms, there will be succession issues. There will be father and son, husband and wife, sisters or brothers or siblings. And sometimes, it's far-fetched. There's a lot of people involved sometimes on a small piece of land, and you've got different objectives there. So managing everyone's sort of policies and what they want to do in terms of their objectives on the farm can sometimes differ. And what we find on some farms is, they'll be asset rich but cash poor. So they've got these opportunities with buildings, but they might not have a structure in place as to how they might be able to take the farm forward. So I think that's quite important. I mean, when you and I set up our farming businesses, we're both from family farming backgrounds, but actually we always set up our own independent farming business. So we've always said that gave us a little bit of freedom to be able to make our own decisions, buy our own machinery, and we would rent land, and it meant that we weren't answerable to other people. And that gave us more opportunities to then go and buy some land and put some planning opportunities on it as well. So what would you say from a business perspective, if there are family farms watching this, what would be your sort of number one tip for advising them on how to run that family business?
I think they need to make sure that their goals are aligned. So obviously being husband and wife, we have the same objectives at the end of the day of what we want to achieve on the farm. And I think if you have multiple families with different mix of personalities, sometimes maybe the husband's involved in the farm and the wife does something different, it's hard to hear all of that noise. Everyone needs to actually realise, right, we've got X amount of money, we're going to invest it in XYZ, rather than one person wanting to proceed and explore, do planning opportunities, do lots of diversification. And you sometimes have another family member who's far more reserved and not willing to take any risks. I think that's where the conflict might arise in farming families. I think you do need to make sure that you're well aligned, you know what you want to do. And also sometimes maybe elect a leader. I would say in terms of us, you are the one that is riskier. You've got loads of good ideas. And I need you as that driving force. If I didn't have you in front of me, I wouldn't be achieving what I am. But they're not saying that you need me behind you to do all the legwork and actually do what we're doing. So we work well together like that. But you do need someone who has got the ideas and got the drive to push and want that next thing, wants to achieve, wants to see what they can do on their farms.
And I would say in our own farming situation, we've got a mixture of structures. We've got our own farming businesses, and then we do have a family farming business as well, don't we? And I would say some of the experience from running that is, we live on site,
Mm.
so we deal with a lot of the day-to-day issues that might not be seen or dealt with. But then other family members have got other strengths that they're dealing with on the farm that we might not have. So it does complement each other well. But, I'd say that we're very much at the coalface
Mhm.
of everything by living there, aren't we? So, if a lorry turns up at 6 in
Yeah.
the morning, it's ringing the
They're
gate
ringing us.
and I'm going out to load it or whatever, so
I do also think that nothing is ever perfect in any
I
kind
agree.
of business, farm, any kind of diversification. And I think everyone needs to know that at the outset, that yes, we might be the ones that are impacted on a day-to-day
Mm,
basis when someone's knocking at the door or delivering a parcel or
mm.
whatever. However, other people have got maybe, I don't know, they've got strengths in dealing with the difficult tenants or
Correct. Yeah.
things like that. So nothing's perfect. Everyone needs to just
Mhm.
be aligned and do their roles, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest learning from what we hear from clients. It's just trying to align, and I know it's easier said than done because there'll be a mix of personalities in those farming businesses. Um, but it's trying to get the next generation into leadership
Mhm.
fairly early on, and giving them a little bit of freedom to create, I think. And, you and I created independently of that. And it wasn't until later in life that we've been able to get into the family farm side of things. For 20 years before that, we were running independently, weren't we, in terms of our farming business? With like Morwenna and I, we were talking about it yesterday with a client, and they're being very proactive at getting the next
Mhm.
generation in, and that will bring forward lots of opportunities for that business because there's a lot of energy there. But there's also what I've learnt is, there are older and wiser people within the
Mhm.
business as well that have been there and seen a little bit. And whether you agree with them or not, sometimes they've got some quite valid points to raise. And as the younger person, you're quite often going, oh, well, come on, I've
Mhm.
got these ideas, I know best. But actually, you realize that when someone might be 20, 40 years older, they have actually been through, y- you know, different market spaces, different economics over their lifetime that might provide a little bit of useful feedback when you're trying to diversify into something. So,
I think you're showing your age there, Guy. You've grown older and wiser. No, I do
early
agree. I
40s.
I think that probably is totally true. The younger generation are probably more impatient, more hungry. They want to make their change.
Mm,
They want to have their impact on the farming business. And the parent maybe can be potentially stuck in their ways, but also is a bit more hesitant because they've seen, like you said, a lot of what could go wrong potentially. So I actually think that is where I know that you and Moana have been doing those calls, and I think that's quite good when you're getting someone external in,
mm,
not to um, be in charge, but almost just to hear what everyone can
mm,
say and give their professional opinion without
mm,
being emotionally involved.
mm,
Because I think from a family perspective, you might not want to upset the other person. Who's in charge? Is it the elder? Is it the
mm.
younger? Whereas if you've got someone else coming in saying, okay, well, actually, I think if it was me, I would do X, Y, Z, then I'd do A, B, C.
Yeah.
It gives them both kind of
Because actually,
something to do.
you've raised quite a good point there. I'd say a lot of the things that come up, on our calls with people is emotion is actually the
Mm.
driving force, and that's then what's causing the conflict. And if we can take the emotion out and have the logic there of what everyone wants to achieve, then you're actually getting far better outcomes. And it's difficult, farms have gone up a lot in value. There's a lot of family interest in there, and there might be siblings that need paying out. There might be, it might be that the farm's losing money. There's lots of factors that sometimes sort of dictate where you're going, but we just see that there's a huge opportunity for planning on farms. And, we've been doing our own planning, like we say, for 20 years now. And it's like some of those things where, we might have had buildings, they're then getting converted into a house or a commercial unit. There's opportunities that come forward. And I'd always say, a number one tip to a farmer is if you've got buildings, hard standing or yards, there's always going to be an opportunity. There might be a cost
Yeah.
up front, But if you can do something with your older buildings and then build new buildings, you're creating double the opportunity.
I think the unique thing about farming as an industry is that you never get out of that industry. Even if people have retired, they don't retire from farming. They're
No.
always there, whether living on the farm or having even a non-active role. Just thinking of my own grandfather, who is 98.
Mm.
He lives on the farm. He's involved in the farm in terms of walking around it. He's emotionally involved in the farm, even though he doesn't physically do anything on the farm.
He's sometimes got some good stories about it, like the Lancaster bomber that went down in such and
Wow.
such field, you know.
But I think it's in the blood, and all the farming fields are all named, and they know the history of why that's called skew path, why that's called, field 30. It's a unique industry. I don't know anything else like it. All the farmers know each other or know of someone else. So I think that's why farms are so unique and so not controlled, but as in they're so important to each family because of the generation and the history, and then the wanting to continue it for future and
Yeah.
future generations.
So what's your number one tip then as a parting comment for farmers in terms of, succession planning and on-farm planning in your own experience?
I would say try and align your roles, try and get on as best you can, and probably in the initial stages, get someone in to help advise, just to set the future of your farming diversifications, and also don't go too fast.
And sometimes I'd say as well is that you don't necessarily need to transfer something. You can sometimes just lease something back. Like we leased our pumpkin patches, didn't we? It was a way of us being able to do something.
Yeah, with
If
family
we had the
help.
ideas, yeah. So
And sometimes I think people want to do everything yesterday.
yeah,
I know that's where you and I differ. You like to go a million miles an hour, and I like to go at a normal speed. But I do think that with things like farming and diversifications, because things are expensive, putting up new barns
yeah.
can be expensive. I think they really need to work out what needs to be done today, what needs to be done next year and the following years, rather than trying to, run before you can walk.
Mm. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been really insightful.
Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. Yeah. So no, I think that's really interesting. I think that farmers will take something away from that, and nothing's perfect, is it? And you've highlighted that. So we just got to try and take the emotion out of it. But there's lots of planning opportunities. Loads of planning opportunities that exist for farmers, and they've just got to look at
Agreed.
it, collaboratively as a family.
Definitely.